Thanks, Mark. If I'd known there was going to be karaoke this morning, I would have worn something else. Okay, so let's just get settled here. So thanks everyone for coming. I was actually kind of surprised that this talk would sell out because it didn't seem as interesting to me as some of the other speakers that have been here in the past. So thank you very much. So I'll be speaking today about happiness, which is kind of strange. Because for me, especially the last 2 years, I've been mostly not very happy. I've been fighting depression for the last 2 years, getting to the point where I was actually having anxiety attacks, spending days lying in bed unable to get up and hyperventilating, and it hasn't been good. A lot of that has to do with the fact that I was finally diagnosed with ADHD. This is, not necessarily a connection that people would make, that, ADHD and depression, somebody who's hyperactive and crazy and, seems manic, why would they get depressed? So I just want to share a bit about what the journey's been like, and there is a light at the end of the tunnel, so it's not going to be all depressing. So the title of my talk today is Shiawase, which is Japanese for happiness. One of these ADHD traits is we like puns. We like puns a lot. So this is actually a pun in Japanese. We have shi, which is paper, normally pronounced kami, but there's an alternate pronunciation. And awase is to align something, so lining up paper. In fact, when I teach origami in Japanese, I will use the word awaseru a lot. I'll line the paper up here, take this edge and line it up over there. So aligning paper equals happiness? Maybe. We'll see. So, depression. It's, as I've said, it's been tough. All my life I've had this feeling that I was different. I react to things differently than most people, and we never really knew what it was. And it wasn't until my son was diagnosed with ADHD it's 2003 now, isn't it? So it was April of 2011 that my son was diagnosed with ADHD, and so of course went home, started reading up on it, trying to learn more about it, and as I was reading, I was looking at it and thinking, wait a minute, that's me. And that's me, and that's me. Maybe I have this too. And so I went to my doctor, and I got tested, and lo and behold, I have ADHD. And it was a light bulb going on over my head. All these things that I'd been struggling with all these years, there's a reason for it. I know what it is now. And unfortunately, and apparently this is common for people who are diagnosed with ADHD as an adult, I thought that the diagnosis meant that things were going to start getting better. And because now I know what it is, right? The explanation is there. So things are going to get better. But no, things actually got worse, because knowing what the problem is didn't mean that I knew how to fix the problem. And, I was put on medication, it helped, but the difference wasn't nearly as drastic as the difference in my son, and I finally figured out why. It's because I've got 40 plus years of bad habits that I'd picked up before the medication, before the diagnosis. Some of the coping mechanisms that I'd stumbled upon worked, some of them didn't. And trying to change those behaviors so that I could function better was much harder than I thought it would be. So, unfortunately, the diagnosis led me into depression because I thought I knew the answer and realized I didn't, and it was much, much harder. So just a brief intro on ADHD. A lot of people don't understand ADHD. It stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. Sometimes it's just called ADD because some people don't exhibit hyperactivity. For the most part, I'm not hyperactive, but definitely have the attention problems. And it is really a misnomer because deficit is wrong as well. People with ADHD don't have a deficit of attention, but we have much less control over our attention. If it's something that's boring for me, I can't focus on it. So there are a number of people in this room who know this very well. People who have asked me for interviews, for example. I get the list of interview questions, and a lot of times I don't finish them and send them back. So I know a number of people have given up on me, and I apologize. If you're willing to nag, I'm still willing to get it done, but it will take some nagging for me to get it done. But the flip side is, for those things that I am interested in, I can hyperfocus. And this is something that they talk about. I can be sitting there and nothing else exists for me. I'm working on whatever it is I'm working on because I'm interested in it, and the rest of the world doesn't exist, and I can do so much more than a normal person could do in that time because I am hyper-focused. But it really has to be something that I'm interested in. I can't turn that on and off. So one of the other big problems with ADHD is impulse control problems. Most people, if something upsets you, and your first response is something that is not socially acceptable, right? Like if somebody says something that upsets you, you might think you want to hit the guy, but you'll stop and think and then not do it, right? The problem with ADHD is the impulse control element is much weaker. So, in my case, unless I'm really on it and focused on keeping myself in check, I might actually hit the guy. Well, years of practice, I don't hit anymore, but I might say something really evil and nasty or explode in anger and so on. And part of the problem, too, is that I'm aware of this, so I'm always keeping myself in check, but that wears me down. It uses up a lot of emotional energy. And so, beginning of the day, I'm usually good. End of the day, my reserves are gone, and the littlest thing that seems like absolutely nothing to most people, and normally would be absolutely nothing to me, but it's that one last thing that pushes me over, and then I can explode. And I've got this reputation for having a bad temper, to the point where there are certain members of my family who won't speak to me anymore because they just can't deal with it anymore. So, it's been very difficult. But these are the problems. But there are some good things. But before we do that, I'd like to do something. This is called the Stroop test. I want to give you all a little taste of what the distractibility of ADHD is like. Okay? So you see a list of words here. We'll take a little bit of time. I want you, when I say go, to start reading the words, starting on the left side and going down and then to the second column, third column, and so on. And read the words out in your head, one at a time, and when you're done, raise your hand. Okay? Ready? Go. Okay, pretty easy, right? Let's make it harder. Okay, now, same task, all right? When I say go, read the words the same order, okay? Go. Okay, still pretty easy, right? Not too bad? All right, third task. I want you to go through the list. Don't read the words. Say the color that the letters are in. All right? And when I say go. All right? And go. You know, I really like this space, you know. There's some nice blue banners here, the red letters of the exit sign back there. I see somebody down there with an orange scarf and, you know, and, oh, the little red light over there as well. And I don't actually see any yellow yet. Nobody's wearing yellow today. All right, you get the idea, right? This is what an ADHD person faces every second of every day. I can't go into a noisy restaurant and have a normal conversation with another person because I'm hearing every single conversation in the area around me. And I can't focus on one of them. Different conversations shift in and out of my consciousness. And it's worse because I speak several languages, so going to a restaurant where people are speaking other languages, I'm picking up conversations in multiple languages. It's a real problem. It makes life really hard. So, you know, I've talked a bit about some of the problems with ADHD. Here's another one. You know, tasks that I don't like, I put off. So this is my studio. And actually, this was my studio about half a year ago. It's actually worse right now. Okay, there's no room to work in my studio at the moment. That cutting board that you see there is currently stacked with a pile of paper about that high, and because I really hate cleaning up. And worse, because there's so much stuff, and it's not just the cleaning, I have to sort through and figure out what I want to keep and what I don't want to keep, and there's so much of it. I don't even want to start. So, you know, procrastination is a problem. I've talked about, you know, how I have to keep myself in check all the time, which is really draining. I like being right, because most of the time I am right. Unfortunately, I'm not always right. But it's really hard for me to, you know, admit that when I'm not right. It's gotten better. I'm better at it, but, you know, it's still a struggle. I really need to be heard in a conversation. You know, when I get cut off in the middle of an idea, you know, the stress level goes way up because it's like, let me finish my thought. You know, I don't care if you agree with me or not. I just want to be able to finish my thought. And these are all things that just make life really, really difficult as an ADHD person. But, like I said, it's not all bad. So, the previous origami that I showed was depression. And this is internal turmoil. This was as I struggled with the depression, and things were starting to get better. You know, I was still very down on myself, but I could start seeing a light. And so I filled in the belly of the figure, and I went in with colors and put in a pattern. There's still turmoil in there, but there's a glimpse of something better, a bit of beauty. And that's what I was trying to capture with this piece here. And so for me, you know, one of the coping mechanisms that I stumbled upon way back when, without even knowing that I had ADHD, was the folding of paper. As everybody knows, I fold paper. And people who know me well know that I fold paper everywhere, literally. I used to get in trouble in class because I was doing origami. I fold paper at church, so I normally sit in the back, so I don't distract other people. You know, I fold paper on the bus, on the train. When I was living in Japan for a couple of years, I would do origami on the train, and even though the Japanese people are more aware of origami than people here, it's really, really weird to see someone doing that on the train. You know, so I was getting weird looks there as well. But for me, it was a coping mechanism. It helped keep me grounded. It was something I liked. It was something I could do without a lot of attention spent, which meant that it was perfect for blocking out the other distractions. I folded in lectures at school because lectures by nature are slow and boring, and my mind was going 50 million directions, and I couldn't concentrate on what the professor was saying. But if I was folding, that took up enough of my brain power that the other distractions wouldn't be able to intrude, and I could focus on the lecture, and so on. So, and the other great thing about origami for me is that it really fed my need to understand things, to solve problems, and to be creative all at the same time. I discovered that I'm very much a left and right brain person. I have this artistic side. I want to express things. But I also have a very analytical, problem-solving kind of a mind. I studied computer science at university. Origami really fits those two halves of my brain together and helps me to be a more complete person in that sense. There's a lot of geometry involved, as you might imagine. And creating a new design is not just about creating an image of something. There's the whole problem-solving aspect of figuring out how to fold the paper in the right order to make the shape that I want. And so, you'll actually discover if you explore various origami artists that a lot of them actually come from a science or a math background. There are physicists and computer scientists and mathematicians and architects and so on who do origami. And it seems to be the perfect art for people like us. And so, other benefits of doing origami for me. Well, actually, no. Sorry, let me rephrase that. Other benefits of ADHD for me, in addition to the origami, is the fact that ADHD people are so creative. And I think that's something that I really enjoy. One of the things that we do is that we make associations between things that most people don't. And sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. I drive my wife crazy because I'll hear something and it makes me think of a song. So I'm always singing stupid little song snippets at her, and it drives her nuts, especially the ones that I do way too often. But that means, though, that for creativity, my view of creativity is there's very little that you can do that is totally brand new. So there are so many artists in the world. There's so many creative people in the world. There are so few truly original ideas. But to be able to take existing ideas, to merge them together in a new way, this to me is how I view creativity. And as it turns out, the ADHD brain is perfect for that. And so, making these crazy associations, puns. My dad, who I also believe has ADHD, but he doesn't really believe it himself, is renowned for his really bad puns, across languages even. We grew up with what some of my friends used to call Joe's dad jokes, which are puns between English and Chinese. All the ones I can remember right now I can't repeat here, so... But they were funny, and I seem to have inherited that. The ability to hyperfocus is also something that's amazing because it lets me create. And I have this perfectionist streak in me, and hyperfocusing allows me to achieve what I want to do. So this was a study of, I was working on pigs, both normal pigs and flying pigs. And of course, bad pun time, the flying pig was called swine flu. It was round about the time that swine flu was in the news, so there you go, right? So, and of course, progressing along that line of thinking, the normal pig became ground pork. But right? But the puns were not the point of this slide, obviously. The point of the slide is to show that hyperfocus allowed me to do repetition after repetition adapting each time, modifying until I got what I considered the perfect form. And so let's see, the pig, the flying pig in the middle and the back would be the finished version of that one, and the dark gray pig on the right would be the finished version of the normal pig. But you can see all of the other ones in various stages of completeness. Some of them are very rough, and that I don't even know what that ugly yellow thing is in the top there. Doesn't even look like a pig, but it must have been because I included it in the picture. But hyperfocus really allows me to fulfill that sense of perfectionism that I want to be able to achieve in my work. And so, folding paper, aligning paper, does it really bring happiness? Yeah, I think it really does. I've been able to embrace certain aspects of this problem that I have, and use it to achieve the goals that I want to achieve. And in doing so, yeah, I think I have attained a certain level of happiness. It's still a long journey. I still get depressed. Still haven't figured out all the things I need to figure out about the condition that I have and how to live with it successfully. But it's getting there. And there's happiness in that. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Okay, I'm going to kick it off with a question. Have you ever found working in any of your creative pursuits? Origami is a great example of it. Have you ever been working on origami and it actually made your mood worse? When you're hyper focusing, and it actually sent you into depression or anxiety?
Not quite that far, but yes, it has made my mood worse. I've gotten to the point where, this is totally a different topic, but Malcolm Gladwell has a book called Blink, where he's talking about high-speed cognition. And when you have spent more than 10,000 hours on practicing something, you can get to the point where you can instantly cognate these things. So I've gotten to the point where if I want to design a new origami, it takes less than a minute in my head, and I know how to do it. And so the times that I've gotten into a bad mood was when I thought I had it, and it doesn't actually work. And after a number of tries, it still doesn't work. And that has gotten me into a bad mood. But it's very, very rare.
Knowing how debilitating depression can be, but knowing that you've been able to create things that no one else could ever have done, if you were born again, would you choose to be born with ADHD, or would you think that it would be better if you didn't have it?
At this point, I would say I'd rather not have it, because the struggles are still there, and it's difficult. In a few more years, like I said, things are getting better. I've found a counselor that I'm working with now who actually has ADHD, so he understands, and the things that the recommendations that he has for me are easier to take, and they seem more relevant and real. I'm hoping that I will get to the point where I can accept it better, and I could answer that question differently. But right now, at this moment, I wouldn't choose to have it. Mm-hmm. Oh.
Hello.
Hi.
Thanks, great talk. I was just curious, we're in a digital age and people talk about going paperless. Hi. Whoa. People talk about going paperless and that, and yet we don't. We still hold on to paper, and I'm just wondering, you have kind of this unique exposure to paper. What is it about paper that we find so appealing?
Wow, that's obviously I could never go paperless in that regard. There have been some very good attempts at modeling origami in computers, but they're not there yet. I often describe it as that creation, the idea of creation ex nihilo, I can never remember the pronunciation, creation out of nothing. And I often say that origami is as close as you can get to that, because there's nothing. It's a piece of paper. Beyond that, you don't need anything else. You don't need tools, you don't need paints, you don't need whatever. It's a piece of paper, my hands, and my brain. I guess my eyes. And I don't think there's an art form that gets as close to creating something out of nothing as origami does. And that's one of the big draws for me.
Thank you for this wonderful talk. Actually, you sound like every one of my kids, one of whom is an artist. And one of the things that I'm wondering is, 1,000 years ago, would this even have turned up as a disorder? And is what your experience of life, how much do you think it may be a response to a highly ordered system? And just to give you some context, I don't know how many parent-teacher interviews I went to, and every single one of them I heard, your son doesn't pay any attention, he's staring out the window, he's tapping his hands, he's just, and I asked every one of the teachers, well, how many of the boys in the class have you said this same thing about? And it's like almost all of them. And it's like, well, are we talking about my kid, or are we talking about the school system? And how much of what you're experiencing is a reflection of a highly ordered system that actually kind of discards the people who don't fit?
Yeah, this is something that that gets discussed a lot in ADHD circles. I have done a fair bit of reading. The disorder has been around, not with the same name, but historically there have been mentions of things like this as far back as the 1600s. So it's not just a now problem, as far as I'm concerned. And the sorts of things that you're talking about, yes, all boys do that, and to some extent all kids do that, but there is a difference. It's to the next level. It's really hard to explain ADHD to somebody who doesn't have it, because I'll say, when I don't want to do something, I put it off, and the normal response is, oh, everybody does that. But you don't understand until you've been at your desk at 2 a.m. When you're 16 years old, knowing that you have an essay due in the morning, and I'm sitting there, pen in hand, paper in front of me, and there's nothing on the page, and I cannot get myself to even put the pen onto the paper.
That's how I ended up writing a lot of my kids' essays.
Yeah. So, it's not the same as, oh, I don't like it, therefore I'm putting it off. It's to the point where you can't do it. It's absolutely physically, well, I guess I shouldn't say physically, but it's absolutely impossible. No matter what I do, I can't get the pen onto the paper to start writing the essay. And that's the example I like to give to try to help people understand just how severe this really is. A lot of people still think, oh, ADHD, it's not real. It's part of the problem too is that the right drug for this is Ritalin, which was prescribed for so many things, and so there's this whole stigma about ADHD. People don't believe it, but you know what? It is real. It's due to a dopamine deficiency in certain areas of the brain, closely related to Parkinson's, and the drugs that are prescribed for it actually do help. So it's not an imagined condition. There's a physical basis for it, and there is a real way of dealing with it. And yes, the school system really does need to learn to adapt to kids with this, because it is becoming more prevalent. I think it's because of increased awareness, not increased incidence.
If those of you on the other side of the room didn't recognize her voice, that was Sandy Garasino asking those questions and mentioned her child. Are you saying that you wrote some of Claire's essays?
Not Claire's, no, the boys, but they couldn't
Like me.
Me. Like me.
But I'm a little bit like you too, Joe.
Yeah, well.
Right. Right. Sandy, who is a former speaker here at Creative Mornings, her daughter Claire that I'm talking about is, of course, Grimes. If anybody's been listening to the top 40 stuff, the hot artists these days, Grimes is the hot Montreal artist, and that's her mother right there.
Oh, Joseph, as you've been using your medications, has it affected your ability to be innovative in a negative or positive way? And I'd like you to speak to that.
Not that I've noticed, no. You know, the medication is just one step. I think I mentioned earlier that the medication hasn't made as marked a difference in me as it has in my son, mainly because the medication gives me the ability, it evens out the chemical imbalance in my brain, so it gives me the ability to do the things that I need to do, but the bad habits are still there. And so you know, I still need to learn some good habits. But yeah, so far, so the medications help, but so far they haven't impacted me in the way that you described.
When you describe the marketed impact on Michael, do you mean it's been better for him, like a much more improvement for him?
Yes,
Oh.
it has been better for him. Yeah, it's you know, he still fights.
He's still Mike.
And yeah, he still struggles. You know, he's a boy. He doesn't. You know, he'd rather play than do his homework, for example. That's his normal. But
That's all boys.
it is better.
Hi, have you taught your son origami, and does he do it? And do you have any other suggestions for ADHD kids?
I have taught my son a little bit. He doesn't love it the way I do, which is fine. He prefers to draw, and that's fine. In terms of suggestions, there's no specific thing I can suggest. You have to find something that he or she really loves, because hyperfocus doesn't work unless they really, really love it. And so I guess the best thing to suggest is to give them the opportunity to try a lot of different things and see if they latch onto something, and that could be their coping mechanism.
We have time for one really good last question. Is it awesome?
When you look at the work of other origami artists, what do you tend to look for? Where do you find creativity in their work?
Oh boy, that's a big can of worms. Yeah, it's hard to answer that question without a long preamble, but I'll see if I can get a short version. Origami is still a very, it's an ancient craft, but in terms of being an art form, it's still very young. I tell people we're still in the renaissance of origami. And currently, the art form as a whole is kind of struggling to get out of the whole, you know, finding bigger and better techniques, and actually get into art where there's expression of the artist. And so, you know, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for people who are doing art as opposed to trying to improve technique or just trying to reproduce other people's work, because there's still an awful lot of that, and frankly, that's boring to me. I want to see people who are pushing it in the sense of expressing themselves with the art as opposed to just doing a bigger and better, more complicated, whatever it is. Thanks.
Brilliant. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Joseph. Thanks very, very much.